The first time my son told a room full of people that I was losing my memory, I was standing close enough to touch him. I had not left the stove on. I had not lost my glasses. I had not taken the money he said I took. But one by one, in that soft, sorry voice, he told the family I was slipping. They believed him. What none of them knew was that my late husband left a voice recorder in his study. One quiet afternoon, I left it running. What I heard was not a worried son. It was a plan. A plan to call me confused, take my house, and do it before my daughter ever found out. They thought they were building a file to prove I had lost my mind. They had no idea I was keeping one too. So when they gathered everyone in my living room to make me sign the papers, I reached into my cardigan, set that little recorder on the table, and pressed play. This is what happened next. The first time my son told a room full of people that I was losing my memory, I was standing close enough to touch him. It was a Sunday, the kind we used to love. The whole family had come to my house, the one Frank and I bought 40 years ago. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and the lemon cake I had made that morning. I remember making it. I remember every step, because baking is the one thing that has never once confused me. Greg was by the counter with his wife, Tara, and two of my cousins. I came in carrying the gravy, and I heard him say it in that soft, sorry voice people use when they think they are being kind. She left the stove on again last week. We're keeping an eye on her. I had not left the stove on. Not last week. Not last year. I stood there with the gravy boat in my hands and waited for someone to laugh and say, "Oh Greg, stop." Nobody did. My cousin Ruth just looked at me with damp, pitying eyes and said, "It happens to all of us, Helen." I set the gravy down so my hands would not shake. And that was when I saw it. Greg looked at Tara. Tara looked back at him. Something passed between them. It was not worry. Worry is loose and frightened. This was tight. This was practiced. It was the look of two people checking that a plan was working. I told myself I was being foolish. I was 71, I was tired, and I missed my husband so much that some mornings I still set out 2 cups. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe grief was making me strange. But I went to bed that night and could not sleep, because one question kept turning over in my mind. If I had not left the stove on, then why was my own son telling people that I had? I decided to watch. Quietly. The next week, my reading glasses disappeared. I keep them on the little table by my chair, always, because that is where I read. I looked everywhere. 3 days later Greg found them in the bathroom cabinet, behind my aspirin, and he held them up like a doctor holding an X-ray. "Mom," he said gently, "do you remember putting these in here?" I did not, because I had not. But when you're 71 and a grown man asks you that question in that voice, something cold happens in your chest. For 1 second, I doubted myself. And I think that second was exactly what they wanted. Then it was my checkbook. Then a pot I supposedly left to burn, though I had not cooked that day at all. Each time, Greg was there to notice. Each time, he wrote something in a little notebook he thought I did not see. People always tell you to trust your family. Nobody tells you what to do when your family is the thing you are afraid of. So I started paying attention to small things, the way Frank taught me to balance a ledger. And one afternoon, flipping my kitchen calendar to the new month, I found a sticky note in handwriting that was not mine. It said, "Mom, Doctor, Thursday 2 p.m. I'll drive you." I never made that appointment. I had never heard of that doctor. The handwriting was small and neat, and I had seen it 100 times on Christmas tags. It was Tara's. Why would my daughter-in-law put a doctor's appointment on my calendar that I knew nothing about, in her own hand, as if I had written it myself. I did not go. I told Greg I had a cold, and I watched his face fall in a way that had nothing to do with my health. He was not disappointed for me. He was disappointed about me. As if I had broken a schedule. That was the week the money started. My bank sends paper statements, because I am old-fashioned, and Frank always said a screen can be edited but paper remembers. I read mine line by line, and there it was. A withdrawal. For $1,000, in cash, from a branch across town I have not set foot in for years. I called Greg. I kept my voice steady. I asked if he knew anything about it. He sighed, long and patient, the way you sigh at a child. Mom, that was you. You took it out for the roof guy, remember? We talked about it. You really don't remember? There was no roof guy. There was no conversation. I am as sure of that as I am of my own name. But here is the terrible thing. I had let Greg help me with the money after Frank died. I was drowning in paperwork and grief, and my son said, "Let me take that off your plate, Mom." I was so grateful I could have cried. I gave him access. I stopped reading every line. I stopped keeping my own records. Frank used to say it, every year at tax time. Always keep your own records, Nell. Always know your own numbers. I had stopped knowing my numbers. And someone had noticed. So I started again. That night I took out a fresh notebook and I wrote down everything. The stove that was never on. The glasses. The checkbook. The withdrawal. Tara's handwriting on my calendar. I wrote it all in ink, with dates and times, because a confused woman cannot do that. I needed proof, even if the only person I was proving it to was myself. Then I remembered the recorder. Frank was a quiet man who thought out loud. For years he kept a little silver voice recorder in his study, and he would talk into it while he worked. Reminders. Numbers. Ideas. After he passed, I could not bear to touch that room. But I went in that night. I opened his desk drawer, and there it was, exactly where he left it. I put in fresh batteries. It still worked. His voice was even still on it, the last note he ever made, saying he needed to call the pharmacy. I had to sit down when I heard it. But under the grief, something else woke up in me. Something that felt almost like Frank standing behind me, telling me what to do. The next morning I called my own doctor, Dr. Patel, who has known me for 15 years. I did not tell Greg. I made the appointment myself, and I asked for the full memory testing. The real kind, with the questions and the drawings and the lists you have to recall. If I was losing my mind, I wanted to know. And if I was not, I wanted it in writing. A few days later, Greg and Tara came by to check on the house. I made coffee and smiled. But before they arrived, I slid Frank's recorder behind the books on the study shelf, the little red light hidden, and I left it running. They did not stay in the kitchen. They went into the study, where Frank's papers still were. They shut the door partway, and they talked in the low voices people use when they think the old woman cannot hear. That night, after they left, I sat alone and pressed play. I heard my son's voice, calm and businesslike, say the words I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. We need the power of attorney signed before she gets any worse. Once that's done, the house has to be sold this year. We can't keep carrying everything. Then Tara, lower, careful. Just keep it slow. Build the file. We're 3 months behind on our own place, Greg. This is the only way out. A pause. And Susan can't find out yet. If Susan finds out, she'll fight it. I turned it off. I sat in the dark a long time. I was not crying. I was doing arithmetic. Build the file. That was what the glasses were. That was the stove, the checkbook, the appointment I never made. They were not mistakes. They were entries in a file. A file built to prove I could not take care of myself, so that a court would hand my son the keys to my whole life. So he could sell my home and pay his debts with it. And Susan, my daughter, 2 states away, the child I had not spoken to properly in 2 years. They were keeping her in the dark on purpose. Because they knew she would stand with me. The next week, Greg moved faster. First came the brochures. A lovely community, he called it, with people your own age and no more worrying about the house. He left one on my coffee table the way you leave bait. Then my real appointment with Dr. Patel vanished from the calendar. When I called the office, they told me my son had phoned to cancel it, and rebooked me with a doctor I had never met, the following month. He was steering me. Even my own health, he was steering. And then, on his way out one evening, Greg lifted my car keys off the hook by the door and slipped them into his pocket. Just for now, Mom, he said, not even looking at me. Just until we're sure. I'd never forgive myself if something happened. I stood in my own front hall and watched my son take my freedom with a smile. And I understood something. If I lost my temper, if I shouted, if I cried, all of it would go into the file. Angry. Erratic. Not safe alone. So I said, of course, dear. Whatever makes you comfortable. I smiled. And inside, I had never been more awake in my life. The hardest part was letting them believe it was working while I quietly took it apart. At the next visit, Greg slid a piece of paper across the table. Just a simple form, Mom, so I can help with the bills. I could see the words power of attorney near the top, half hidden under his hand. I picked up my reading glasses, the ones that keep wandering, and I studied it slowly. Then I said, my eyes are tired tonight, Greg. Let me read it properly tomorrow. You always taught me to read things twice. I handed it back, using his own gentleness against him. He did not like it. But what could he say? No, Mother, do not read it. That same week, Tara cornered my sister Joan at the grocery store. In a worried whisper, she said I was not really safe alone anymore, and that the family was looking at options. She was salting the ground, so that when I finally told the truth, people would already believe I was confused. I felt the walls closing in. I called Susan. I left a message. Sweetheart, I need you. Please call your mother. It's important, and it's about more than you think. She did not call back. I learned later that Greg had reached her first. He had told her I was having a hard time. That I was saying things. That I was imagining people are against me. He had built the file for her, too. And that is when it nearly broke me. Not with tears. With tiredness. I sat at my kitchen table and thought, I am one old woman, and they have surrounded me so completely that the truth itself now looks like my disease. Who would believe me? Maybe it was easier to sign. Maybe it was easier to disappear into their lovely community and let them have the house. Then I looked toward the study, where Frank's recorder sat. And I heard his voice in my memory, plain as morning. Always know your own numbers, Nell. No. Not this house. Not on a lie. So I got organized. I went to Dr. Patel by taxi, since I had no keys. I sat through every test. The memory questions. The clock you have to draw. The lists. At the end she took off her glasses and said, Helen, I'll be honest. Your scores are excellent. There is no sign of dementia. None. Your memory is sharper than most people half your age. I asked her to put it in a letter, signed and dated. She did. I held that letter like it was made of gold. Then the bank. I went in person and asked a manager to walk me through every withdrawal from the last year. And there it was, in their own records. The $4,000, and others I had not even caught, had been taken with a debit card. The card was not mine. It was linked to the access I had handed Greg in my grief. The manager went quiet. Then he said, "Mrs. Carver, I think you should speak to a lawyer." So I did. Her name was Ms. Reyes, and she works with families like mine more often than you would ever want to believe. I laid it all on her desk. The notebook. The doctor's letter. The bank records. And the recorder. She listened to everything. When the recording ended, she was very still. Then she asked me one question. "Helen, do you want to stop this quietly, in a letter no one ever sees? Or do you want to stop it in front of them?" I thought about 40 years in that house. I thought about being called crazy in my own kitchen while my cousin patted my hand. I thought about my keys in my son's pocket. I said, "In front of them." The meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon, in my own living room. Greg arranged it like a man who had already won. He invited the cousins, my sister Joan, even old neighbors, so there would be plenty of witnesses to watch Mom accept the plan. He set the brochures on the coffee table. He had the power of attorney form in a folder, and a pen laid neatly beside it. He had no idea I had a folder too. They settled in with their coffee. Greg stood, cleared his throat, and began. He talked about how much he loved me. How hard this was. How I had been struggling. How I forgot things. How it was time to make safe choices for my golden years. Heads nodded. Ruth dabbed her eyes. Tara watched me with that soft, false concern. When he finished, he turned to me. "Mom, would you like to say anything before we sign?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to play something first." And I took Frank's little silver recorder out of my cardigan pocket and set it on the coffee table, right on top of the brochures. Greg's smile flickered. "Mom, what is that?" "It's your father's," I said. "He always said, keep your own records." And I pressed play. For a moment there was only the hum of the study. Then Greg's own voice came out of that little speaker and filled my living room, clear as anything. "We need the power of attorney signed before she gets any worse. The house has to be sold this year." The room changed. You could feel it, like the air before a storm. The heads that had been nodding turned to stare at him. Ruth's hand froze on her cheek. Then Tara's voice, careful and cold. "Just keep it slow. Build the file. And Susan can't find out yet." Greg lunged forward and grabbed the recorder off the table. I looked at him, my son, and I said it very quietly. "There's a copy, Greg. There are several. One is with my lawyer." He sat back down like his legs had stopped working. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then he tried. Of course he tried. He said it was taken out of context. He said he was only looking out for me. He said the money was for my own bills. So I opened my folder. I laid Dr. Patel's letter on the table. The one that said, in plain words, that my memory was excellent and there was no sign of dementia. I laid down the bank records, with the withdrawals circled in my own hand, and the line showing the card was linked to his access, not mine. I laid down my notebook. Every date. Every staged mistake. Written in steady ink. "I did not leave the stove on," I said. "You said I did." "I did not lose my glasses." You hid them. I did not take that money. You did. I looked around the room. I am not losing my memory. I have been keeping it, every single day, while my own children tried to take everything I have. Tara broke first. She started to cry. Greg, I told you this was wrong. I told you. It was not quite true, but fear does that to people. And that was when the front door opened. Susan stood there. My daughter. Car keys still in her hand, tears already on her face. She had driven through the night. One of my messages had finally reached her, really reached her, and beneath my careful words she had heard that her mother was in trouble. She looked at the recorder, at the folder, at her brother sitting gray-faced on the couch. She understood all of it in about 3 seconds. She crossed the room, sat down beside me, and took my hand. I'm here, Mom, she said. I'm so sorry. I'm here. After that, the room emptied fast, the way rooms do when people are ashamed to have been part of something. The cousins left. Joan stayed, holding my other hand. It was Ms. Reyes who finished it. She had been sitting quietly in the corner the whole time. Now she stood, introduced herself as my attorney, and explained, in a calm voice, what Greg had never imagined. I had already revoked the access I gave him. I had already placed the house in a protected trust, so it could not be sold out from under me by anyone. I had already updated my will. And the assisted living contract he had pre-signed on my behalf, the one he was so proud of, was not worth the paper it was printed on. Because I had never been incompetent a single day in my life. And she had Dr. Patel's letter to prove it. Greg looked at me, smaller than I had ever seen him. Are you going to press charges? He asked. About the money? And there it was. The choice. The one the lawyers leave to you. I could have ended him. I had the proof. The hurt part of me wanted to. But he was still my boy. The boy who used to fall asleep in Frank's lap. I did not want revenge. I wanted my life back, and I wanted the truth to stay the truth. So I told him how it would be. He would pay back every dollar, on a schedule, in writing, with Ms. Reyes watching. He would tell every person in that room, by phone if he had to, that he had lied about my mind. There would be no more managing. And if he ever wanted to be my son again, in any real way, it would start with honesty. It would be slow. And it would be on my terms. That is mercy, I said. It is not forgetting. I will never forget this. But you are still my child, and I would rather you learn than be destroyed. He cried then. Whether it was shame or relief or both, I do not know. Maybe he does not either. That was 8 months ago. Greg pays me back on the 1st of every month. We are not close, not the way we were, and maybe we never will be. But he calls, and he tells the truth now, mostly. That is more than I had before. Susan moved back to be near me. She comes for dinner twice a week. Some Sundays we bake that lemon cake together, and we laugh, and I have my daughter again. That is a gift I never expected to come out of so much pain. I have my keys back. I drive to the store, to the library where I used to work, to Joan's house for cards on Fridays. I have my home, the one Frank and I built our whole life inside. And no one can take it from me now. On the mantel, beside Frank's photograph, sits a small silver recorder. I do not keep it there as a weapon. The danger is past. I keep it there to remember something Frank told me 100 times. Something I forgot for a little while in my grief, and will never forget again. Always keep your own records. Always know your own numbers. And no matter how old you get, no matter how gentle the voice that tells you otherwise, never let anyone convince you that you do not know your own mind. My name is Helen Carver. I am 71 years old. My memory is just fine. And I have the recording to prove it.